Hi there, everyone. Today I have with me Erin Tarrant, one of the artists in the show Vessel, open in Grant Hall Gallery from October 7th to October 18th. Today we're going to be discussing some of Erin's paintings, so welcome to our interview. All right, Erin, if you could describe your practice in one sentence, what would you say?
I would say that I take situations that we can't acknowledge or we ignore, and I make pictures of it so that way nobody can really ignore it. They can picture it exactly how it's supposed to be or how I interpret it, and I just make it known.
Very cool. And sorry to elaborate a little bit about that. What kind of situations inspired this work behind us?
So I'm mostly inspired by trauma in kids. So growing up and either having situations where you grow up and it's not what everybody else went through and it's so normalized for you, and then you grow up and you're like, wow, that really should be illegal, you know? And it's just, we take kids and just like the female body in the whole, I feel like we disregard it just because, you know, we're the lesser amount apparently. So, you know, it's just one of those things where I want to make people aware of it, that like we're not going to be quiet about it. The kids is where we should really start, female or male or non-binary, that type of thing. And it's a very important topic.
Yeah, definitely. So then going off that note, what draws you to make work about the grotesque in relationship with the body?
My minor was in anthropology, and I took a forensic anthropology class. It was one of the best classes I've ever taken. It actually wanted to like make me go into that type of career path, just because you go through like generational trauma, you go through, you have to find people, you have to essentially give therapy to people so that way they can actually have a proper funeral for them. And not only that, is I also really like documentaries. So whether it's about a past sentence or one that's going on right now, just going on based off of the reactions of the people who are sentenced and whether they're innocent or not, that just really is up my alley, because they could act like they're innocent and then be completely guilty, and of course that inspires me to like do more with that. So
totally. Yeah. Awesome. So taking this really human-esque form but then combining it with this really abject, super texturized mouth feeding and then flipping it upside down, this is do you feel like this has any relationship to a particularly feminine experience or women's perspectives?
I think so, because I originally wanted it to be very grotesque. I wanted it to be, you really notice certain aspects that are like more sunken in, it really gives that expression, and just that like childhood innocence, or really just any type of innocence, and that gets taken away from you. It's everybody's experience, but for me as a female reproductive, like that really hits close to me. And then for me to choose it upside down, it's a more interesting concept, and it really makes you focus on what's happening on the top part. That's where you're going to look first.
Very cool. A lot of your work depicts very abjectish, kind of grotesque forms. Do you feel that this ties into a non-gender conforming experience?
It does, just because as somebody with a female reproductive system, and that's non-binary, I'm kind of forced to look at that and interpret it, and then what I want to be is something completely different, something that isn't always easily accessible, and so I kind of put that in my artwork, that way I can see it how I want to, and everybody can be represented by it too.
That's very cool. The last question I have for you today is, can you speak about the difference between Craving, Innocence and Hanging by a Thread? How do they compare, or how do you compare the imagery of prey and consumption?
So I compare them very similarly. I see it as a kind of in the process of processing your emotions, processing what happens, and then the aftermath. So like the process of really getting into it, of recognizing it, and then the hanging by a thread is like kind of that mental status afterwards where you kind of have to re-heal from it and you feel like you're hanging by a thread type thing. So I see them very similar. And then in regards to the prey and consumption, I see it, again, this kind of a similar way. It's kind of hard to tell with this one, but there's like a sheep baby right there, and then there's a rabbit. So it's kind of like how we consume our prey. We consume animals that, are just trying to live. So my thing between them is that regardless of the situation, we are always going to consume something, and whether that's our prey of emotions, our prey in like certain cases of like more harsher topics, like they're going to consume on prey of kids, that type of thing. So I feel like they're both hand in hand, and you can interpret them as is,
A lot of times artists that are working like with real thick paint and addition, I mean, you mentioned using clay in some of your two-dimensional work, and there's also three-dimensional components. So working with materials that have been traditionally beautiful, but then when you're working with them, they have this really, again, I'm gonna use the word grotesque, probably overused at this point, but this really kind of, it's almost really like coagulation and really deeply textured that adds so much information to the context of the work. Do you feel that you're challenging a lot of, maybe tradition in painting when it comes to using impasto and different techniques like that?
I feel like I am. I've been experimenting with a lot of different mediums lately, but a lot of the combination of mediums kind of roots in that like fragility in it, in the topic. So I feel like the more layers, the more fragile it gets, and then it really gets on that base of emotion on the piece,
Very cool. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. This was Erin Tarrant. Please follow them on all the socials and check out their work anytime. So thank you again for being a part of Vessel. It was super excited to have your work.
Yeah, thank you for having me.